Well guys, we made it up to Boulder, Colorado. It's getting cold. Let's go up and see Chuck and Laura up at Freedom Folding Bikes. Hey Chuck, how's it going?
Hey Brian, welcome.
I want to get some joints checked out on this thing and make sure that it is, all good to go, because I noticed there's a little bit of play in the rear, so I wanted to make sure everything was acceptable or within acceptable tolerances. So yep. I guess I'll take off the tea bag.
Well, with the Brompton, we've got 3 hinges that are important to keep an eye on. You got the 2 front hinges, have two potential issues. This plate that holds the hinge together, that could cause a little bit of that to happen. And then the other is the actual hinge pin itself could wear and could cause some slop. But this one is very uncommon. It does happen with older bikes that get lots of use. This one here is actually fairly common once the bike gets a number of years of use. The easy way to check this one is to look to see if there's any gap. So what happens is, as these wear, this plate cap will push all the way against the metal of the frame, and so the wear will be in these side bevels. Okay. And so this will go all the way on, and it won't tighten anymore.
I see. Because it's
pressed all the way against there. And so you want to make sure there's just a little bit of a gap so that it can still tighten the hinge together. That one looks good. This one looks good.
Now, is there any issue with the steer tube bearings coming loose or anything like that? Or
yes, that can certainly happen. You can usually test that by pulling the front brake and wiggling, and you have to make sure you're not feeling the play in the rear suspension bushing. You want to make sure you feel that there's, and sometimes what you can do is put a little weight here and try to feel if there's any play in the actual headset. None on this one.
Excellent. I was worried about that because I torque on the handlebars quite hard when I'm climbing hills.
Yep. So this one, the other thing that can happen is this is tight. Often when people get these bikes, from the factory direct, or some place that isn't a
Brompton dealer.
A Brompton dealer, the headset's too tight.
I see.
And when you turn the handlebars, you feel a little notchiness in it. And,
yeah, the bearings.
Yeah, and I would say 20% of the bikes that I get from the factory have that situation.
I see.
Maybe more. And then the third joint is this rear pivot.
Now that's the one I'm actually worried about.
Yep.
I don't want it to get to where it's at its maximum tolerance before it ends up getting replaced. I'd rather nip it in the bud when it starts to get to where you feel that it's getting a little bit on the unacceptable side.
So what I'm feeling is there is just a tiny bit of play in there, and
because this bike takes a beating, and that's the only thing I'm really worried about. I think that the 2 clamps and stuff are pretty fine for the most part.
Yep.
With the clamps, if they wear, that's an easy replacement, right? You just replace the clamp and you're good to go. That if it starts wearing out too much, it wears that bushing out. Is it possible that it digs into the metal?
You'd have to wear a lot for it to dig into the metal, because the bushing is maybe an
so if it's digging into the metal, you're going to notice some fishtailing, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but even if the bushing is worn, and this one is worn just a little bit, and
I don't fold it that much. It's the riding.
It's the riding.
Yeah, it's the riding that does it.
Yeah, and replacing the bushings is a pretty simple affair.
Do you have those in stock?
I do.
Is it possible for me to get one just to keep in my supply, just in case I'm ever out of town and something happens? I can
certainly do that, but the problem is you need a special reaming tool. Once the bushings are installed, then you need to ream it out.
I put my bike under more stress than probably your average rider does, so
Yep.
That's what I'm worried about. But
Do you want to replace this one now?
well, if you have the time, if
We
not,
can do it.
excellent. All right.
Here we go. All right, first thing we got to do is get the crank set off on the drive side only. Come on. Take the chain tension off. Take the chain off the chain ring. We're going to pull the crank off.
Crank remover tool.
Yeah. That has to go in all the way, or you strip the threads. And that just comes off.
Okay, forces screw, pulls it off.
Okay, there we go. Now, with any luck.
Okay, so you got 2 Allen keys.
Yep, and usually you can get one side. But it's the second side that's the hard one.
I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, they're in there.
Well, that's a good thing too.
Yeah.
You don't want those things coming loose on you while you're riding down the road. And just to reiterate, guys, I put my bike through a lot more stress. I've had this bike for probably about 8 months or so. So if you see the abuse, that I don't abuse it like neglectfully abuse it, but I definitely do put it through some stress. There's no doubt about that. But when it starts having any kind of play in it, it generally gets me concerned.
That's the bolt that came out. You can see the red Loctite on there.
Red Loctite.
This is the tool that I've made. What this does is it goes in, and similar to that, and then I can tighten this down using that bolt, and it's going to hold the axle or the hinge pin in place so that I can take it out on the other side.
I see.
It holds the pin so that it doesn't move, so that I can loosen the other side.
I see. Now, for your average rider, how often does this actually go bad? Is there a specific, I mean, just out of your experience, you think?
It's usually
A couple years, maybe?
a couple years.
A couple years. That goes to show you how much I ride. I ride every single day, many miles. So I go through chains like it's nobody's business, and I go through a lot of other wear components.
All right, so that's being held in place. Now, we want to heat up that red Loctite. Getting it to break only on this side. There we go. Got it. Nope. We did not.
So if it doesn't come out that way, then it's time to drill it.
And it's time to drill it.
Mine would have to be a problem.
tangled.
That's the worst case scenario there, right?
Yep, that is the worst case scenario. Now we gotta get this out.
So normally the tool would lock it into place and you'd be able to break it loose from this side.
Yep. Now we just take the tool out. And then we'll take the axle out. So now the rear triangle is loose. So we're going to pull it down. And there we go. These are the nylon washers. Go in there. You just want the bushings. So those guys.
Oh, okay. Yeah. See, it's where these get all wore out, and then if it starts getting into the metal, then you have to kind of drill the metal out too, huh?
Yep. So there's the axle or hinge pin. Now we're going to take the old ones out. One, that's just a regular tap, and that just basically grabs the old one.
And then you're able to grip onto it and pull it out.
Yep.
But if you had a drift tool set, you could probably just hammer them out if you can do it.
Yeah, it's pretty hard.
Is it?
Yep. This is the easier way to do it.
So basically just works it out.
Yep.
All right. But that just goes to show you, if you want to do a repair like this, it, you know, you might want to think twice about it if you're not very mechanically inclined.
So now you can see inside there that plastic material.
Yep. That yellow plastic
That
material.
yellow plastic material, that's what's going to get reamed when these get pushed in. So now we're going to push those in, and I use high-tech
Just to kind of
clamp. There we go, both in. And we need a special reamer like this. And what that's going to do,
this is the part that,
yeah, so that goes through and gets the exact alignment. And then we use our wrench to ream it, and then
that just cuts off a little bit of that
yellow.
that yellow rubber.
Yep.
That way the bushing is exactly as thick as it needs to be.
Yep. All right, so there, nice little spindle. Now this is going to go in here, and there is no play in that one. Then
Nice.
we need
The little.
two little nylon washers, and we need bolts. We've got one here, and we've got one here. I'm going to put a little new Loctite on there. We're going to put some red Loctite on those, and on that. Carefully without losing those washers. Putting these on is easy because you're turning against each other. So you don't have to worry about the...
You don't have to worry about the other one spinning.
Right. Okay. Good and tight. No play. That's what you want.
Sweet.
No play. And then we put the chainring back on.
See, it's nice to have a folding bike store where you can get this stuff replaced for you and not have to fumble through it.
This is a job that you do not want to do on your own without...
There's special tools that are required. There's a little bit of knowledge on, you know, thicknesses and clearances, and yeah, you probably don't want to do it by yourself unless you're pretty knowledgeable. That's a major structural part of your bike too. If it ever came loose or fell apart, it won't be pretty.
Put the crankset back on, and then we torque the crankset to the proper torque. Check the other side as long as we're at it. Yep. Everything looks good.
That reduction gear we put on the rear last time is doing better.
Oh, the 12 tooth?
Yeah, the 12 tooth instead of the 13 that was on it.
Yep, nice.
But I'm probably going to go with a bigger one in the front at some point.
Okay. Good. Looking good.
All right.
So
that's the rear hinge pin or bushing replacement.
Rear hinge.
Rear hinge replacement.
Yep.
Which periodically has to be done depending on how much you fold the bike, depending on how much you ride the bike. It really depends on a lot of factors.
Those are the parts that came out. That's the one we had to destroy that to take it out. It's actually got some marks on it, so there's a couple of nicks. I'm just going to toss it.
Okay.
It's not worth keeping. If there's any nicks on these at all, they're going to wear the bushing faster. And so that's garbage.
So there was no kind of lube or anything you put on that, or?
Nope, it's a self-lubricating bushing.
Good to know. So that's pretty much it. Anyways, I'm going to pay Chuck for the repair, and we got to get home. But I hope you guys found that very informational. I really did. I didn't realize exactly how much went into that. And I'm glad that, I mean, it looks easy, and you think you could just take that off and, you know, order the parts and put it in yourself. But it's a lot more involved, as we just saw. So it's probably not something, unless you're really comfortable doing it, that you want to do on your own. We're going to say thanks to Chuck for showing us that.
Yeah. And for those of you that contemplate doing that yourself, this was a worst case scenario. Occasionally I'll find a bike where I can get both bolts out without having to use heat. That's pretty rare. Typically happens with older bikes. The new ones they use, the Loctite they use is really good. So it's really hard to get them out without heat. And I would say 20% of the replacements require drilling. You just can't get them apart.
Which is a good thing, because we don't want it coming apart while we're riding, right?
Right.
Well, anyway, guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that little informational video. If you guys have any comments or questions, just leave it down in the comment and questions section. If you have any comments for Chuck, obviously leave those down in the comments section. I'd really like to thank Freedom Folding Bikes, Chuck here. Really like to thank him for taking the time out of his day to show us that repair. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot. I don't know if you guys learned a lot. We'll try to do a video like this maybe every week or so, maybe a repair video or a tutorial of some sort. I'm not quite sure of the format, but we'll figure something out. Anyway, guys, I'm going to bid adieu. I'm going to pay Chuck and get heading home before it gets too much darker. I will catch you guys on the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.